What's going on, BookTube? I just got the coolest copy of Virginia Woolf's Miss Dalloway. This is an annotated edition from Norton. The annotation is by Merv Emery, and it just is a beautiful edition. The size is just perfect. Inside, if I can show you here, just some wonderful art, photography. On the sides here are the annotations with the body of the novel in the middle. And I'm just falling in love with the annotations. And I'd read the novel in the past, but it's been a while since I've read Mrs. Dalloway. Virginia Woolf is one of my favorite novelists. To the Lighthouse in particular is one of my all-time favorite novels. And if you're not familiar with Virginia Woolf, I really would highly recommend beginning with Mrs. Dalloway. You can even begin with To the Lighthouse, though I think Miss Dalloway in certain ways is more accessible to the average reader. But it is the story of Clarissa Dalloway as she prepares for a party she's holding, and the entire book takes place in one day as you see her prepare for this party, and then various characters that the narrative goes in and out of their perspectives. So the beauty of Virginia Woolf is the way she's able, not only her lyrical beauty, but the way she is able to describe the life of the mind. And the mind is bursting with all these wonderful memories and experiences and seemingly small moments that develop and bloom into the beating heart of what life is. And I think that's some of the best writing you can ever read in relation to the life of the mind and narratives about the inner consciousness of characters is in Virginia Woolf. I think beyond just the lyrical beauty, she really explores that kind of loneliness that we all face when we can't quite cross over the barrier between humans. You know, we have such a full life inside our own heads, and yet the inability to connect with others in a way that we might like. And we see this in so many of her characters who are full of the beauty of life and yet are still distanced in some ways from the people within their lives. So Mrs. Dalloway is a wonderful, beautiful example of modernist writing at its best. And some people would consider this her masterpiece above To the Lighthouse. To the Lighthouse to me features one of the best sections in all of English language literature, the time passes section, which is the middle part of To the Lighthouse, where decades pass within the span of a handful of pages. And it to me is just a wonderful, evocative, sad, beautiful piece of writing that to me is incomparable in terms of how it deals with the great beauty and the great sadness of life within just a handful of pages. And I would certainly recommend To the Lighthouse, but Mrs. Dalloway is certainly one of the more beautiful novels you'll ever read, and I'm interested to see what you guys think about it, or if you've read it, just comment about what you thought of it. I feel like, too, with a lot of covers of Virginia Woolf, I take issue with some of the covers because they have, a young lady with a parasol walking down the streets of London, and doesn't necessarily represent the impressionistic, beautiful parts of Virginia Woolf's writing. She so often will take something as simple as the tolling of a bell, in the middle of a London street, and then use it to develop all these different links with the character's past life and mirror the lives of the other characters and just kind of show the interconnectedness of all of life, while at the same time showing the distance between lives. And I think that's a really cool, amazing feat for any writer. But the way it's done in Virginia Woolf's writing, I don't think has ever really been recreated in a satisfying way by other writers. And I think that the peak of modernist writing for me is Virginia Woolf. And I think sometimes it gets kind of lumped in to this whole idea of modernism in the early 20th century, and it doesn't do necessarily justice to all the writers that had their own unique individual voices. It just gets lumped into this kind of stream of consciousness. That's what modernism was. They were trying to mimic the way humans think and represent that in some form of art that wasn't a conventional realist literary narrative. And that's true, but it also, for Virginia Woolf at least, it wasn't just depicting that just for the sake of being having some kind of complex literary device. It was used as the best, most poetic way to actually depict the way we do think, and the best way to experience the reality of our train of thought, the reality of how we experience things in a nonlinear fashion. And these kinds of techniques that she really perfected when read not as some kind of exercise in complex narrative, but actually in the sensation of human thought and human character, it becomes an entirely unreplicable experience when you read Virginia Woolf's writing. So please take some time, if you haven't, and at least read one of her novels, if not all of them. They are great, and I hope you enjoyed this video.